Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the first meeting of the Business Regeneration and Planning Overview and Scrutiny Committee for this year. So, housekeeping. A fire drill is not expected, so if an alarm does sound, please evacuate the building as quickly and as calmly as possible. Please use the stairs and not the lifts. Once outside of the building, if you would gather outside the Virgin Money building, which was formerly the Yorkshire Bank, on the opposite side of the road. Exit by the door by which you entered or by the fire exit as clearly indicated by a standard screen sign. If you need assistance to evacuate the building, please make yourself known to a member of staff and they will be able to help you. This meeting is being recorded for future publications and for live streaming on the Council's website. Please ensure that your mobile phones are turned off or turned on to silent. Thank you very much indeed. As far as I'm aware, we do not have any apologies. Is that correct? Okay, thank you very much indeed. Oh, yes, indeed, Councillor. Can you please record that? Thank you, Councillor. Item 3, minutes from the previous meeting. Can I have someone to approve those minutes, please? Thank you, Councillor Householm. And second, Councillor Condacor.
Chair, can I second word amendment, please?
Okay, yes.
Just at the bottom of page 10, my question's got an extra question mark in it. It's been so. Can they ask the leader if any survey is going on? Question mark. So, if you could take that question mark off, it would make it read properly. Thank you. But otherwise, I'm happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Condacor. Can we deal with that? Thank you. Declaration of interest. Do we have any other declarations of interest apart from what's already on your schedule? No, thank you very much indeed. We have no public consultations. Is that correct? Okay, thank you. Item 6, moving forward, questions to the Cabinet. Does any of the members here have a question for the Cabinet member present? Yes, Councillor Condacor.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple for the Leader of the Council. Firstly, there's been in the press about the ring road they're building out. I think it was an Overton or whatever they were going to call it, outside the railway station where Dunelm and Empire Gym is. As with other developments, I'm always most concerned about relocation of businesses. I know this is actually a county council project or led, but I think it's important that we actually know what's going to happen to the businesses, the car parking, because it's quite often used by the railway, people going to the railway station. And it also ties in with plans to actually get an entrance on the Wellington side of the railway line, so people who park by Dunelm could actually go on the Wellington side instead. So if the leader could just give us a quick update in terms of if he knows what's being done to particularly relocate Dunelm, because it's a very big employer and a very much welcome part of the retail sector in Nuneaton. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I am aware of conversations ongoing between the county and Dunelm, but these are commercially sensitive, so I don't think it would be appropriate for me to comment on these in an open forum, because it may give one side or the other an undue advantage. But I can confirm there are conversations ongoing and all options are being considered in terms of whether Dunelm, what would be the impact if Dunelm does stay in its current location, or if the preferred option is that it moves somewhere else within the town. I don't think in open session I could comment any further than that.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Yes, indeed.
Thank you for that answer. I know you can't go into details, but I just wanted to be reassured that there was work ongoing. And also on the Wellington entrance park, because obviously we're losing a lot of parking spaces and station access with building a giant roundabout there, and we lose part of the Borough Council's car park. I think half the car park's Dunelm, and then it wraps around and half it's Borough. So I didn't know what was happening with that in terms of compensation. Thank you, Chair.
That would form really part of the wider issue about the transport hub, which we are looking at on the current railway site. That will be a more longer-term aim, because obviously we have to get the transport authorities involved, but we do now actually have it on their horizon, which is more than we had 2 or 3 years ago. In terms of compensation for car parks, etc., that would also have to form part of the consideration about how we move forward. But until we know what is happening with the Dunelm site and all of the car parking around there, I can't comment much further than that.
Yes, Councillor Condacon.
Thank you, Chair. An unrelated matter, I was very pleased you did a radio interview this morning. It's good to actually have Cabinet members and leaders standing up and telling people what's going on. But I was a bit concerned about the long time scales of working out what's happening to the Civic Hall in Bedworth. You mentioned it was going to be a 14-month extension to the contract, but for the Coventry and Warwickshire Partnership CCG. But obviously the long-term future of the Civic Hall needs discussing, and obviously people are very passionate about having pantomimes and things back. So I don't know if you've got a time scale on when we're actually going to release a plan for that. Because obviously we don't want to wait 14 months for that. It'd be nice if we were starting to plan the future of the Civic Hall fairly soon. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Wilson.
Strictly speaking, Councillor Condacon will know that the Civic Hall will form part of the Finance and Public Services Overview and Scrutiny panel, but as leader I'm quite content to answer the question. Firstly, yes, I am more than happy to go out there and answer questions from the public and from the radio, which is more than the previous administration did. I want to be absolutely categorically clear on this. It is the CCG, the Coventry and Warwickshire Partnership Trust, who have requested a 14-month extension. It is them who have specified March 2023. If they'd have asked for a 3-month extension, a 6-month, a 9-month, whatever, that was their decision. My view as leader of the council is that public health must take a priority when it comes to this issue of COVID, and that it would be irresponsible of me to turn down their request. I also think it is irresponsible of others to make claims that we can just hand this over to GP surgeries, or we can hand this over to pharmacies, etc., or we can put them in some kind of empty shop unit. Those empty shop units were considered before the Civic Hall was even used, all across the borough as it happens. Some of the alternative sites have already shut down because the business owners actually want them back because it is more commercially viable for them. For example, Saunders Hall was being used as part of the COVID response. I would much rather have GP surgeries being used for seeing sick and ill patients who have a number of other complaints other than COVID. I would rather see pharmacists being used to dispense medicine for those who are sick, rather than having, and let's face it, pharmacies aren't designed to take lots of people anyway. It's usually a smallish shop where that is. With regards to the Civic Hall, we are going to be looking at how we can make it more financially viable over the next 14 months. We will use the opportunity given by CWPT to do that, which is why I was disappointed to see the tweet from Councillor Condacor earlier about how this is, by stealth, a method of balancing the books. It isn't. It is because Coventry Warwickshire Partnership Trust have specifically asked us. If it had been 3 months, we'd have taken that saving too, whatever that saving would have been. It just so happens that the 14-month saving is £200,000. What we have to address are the underlying issues with the Civic Hall, which hitherto the previous administration did not want to address. It was a sacred cow. If we dare touch the Civic Hall, we won't do anything. But I want to put some facts on the table to Councillor Condacor about this. We know that the Civic Hall needs over £1 million spending on it to bring it anywhere near up to scratch to hold any shows, and to make it something which can be used something akin to properly, even though it wasn't used properly before. Even on the boilers alone, that will cost over £200,000 just to replace the boilers. As someone who is green, I would hope he would agree with me on this, that it is hugely energy inefficient, a building of that size from the 1970s. And so even trying to address that is going to be a massive issue about how we reduce the issues surrounding that. We know that for every ticket which is sold and we get the money in, we still subsidise that to £25. If Councillor Condacor buys a ticket now for a show at the Civic Hall, we would still, as a council, have to fork out £25 in subsidy to the Civic Hall. That is not viable in the long term. It is £800,000 a year, even after you take away the £400,000 roughly income that we get. That is not a long-term viable business. If that was my business or Councillor Condacor's or whoever, they would have shut it by now, because it is not sustainable. So we will be looking at options which will keep an entertainment venue in the heart of Bedworth, but is something which I accept will probably have a subsidy of some kind, because arts will never ever wipe their face completely. I get that. But it cannot be fair to taxpayers of this borough that we are subsidising to that tune when we have to look at our refuse collections with the expansion of the borough, if we have to look at the parks and open spaces, if we look at all the other things that we do. And I'm aware that there are over 500 people who have signed this petition, and I get that this is a very emotive issue, which is why I want to inject some facts into this. But the reality is that if those over 500 people did actually use the Civic Hall, if we had over 500 people attend on a show, the Civic Hall would be more financially viable. We are lucky if the Civic Hall actually gets anywhere near half capacity. It's usually around the 250, 300 mark. That isn't sustainable long term, so we have to address how we do that. And I know that Councillor Condacor, like myself and my group, when we were in opposition, championed actually making the Civic Hall more financially sustainable. So I would hope he would agree that it is a perfect opportunity to use this breathing space that CWPT themselves have asked for, so that we can identify a longer term strategy for the Civic Hall. Just giving it £800,000 a year may have suited the Labour Party, but it isn't financial sense. And under this administration, we will bring financial sense and rigour back to the books of this authority.
Thank you very much for that response, Councillor Wilson. Yes, Councillor Condacor.
Thank you, Chair. Just thank you very much for your response. I do get a lot of that, and I did a lot of the calculations before. My question actually was, what was the timescale for actually finding out when we had a rough idea what we're doing? Thank you, Chair.
Well, I think I did actually answer that, Chair, that we will be using this next 14 months to do that, to try and find a long-term solution to a almost 50-year enigma is going to take some time. If I was to rush out a plan for Councillor Condacor now, he would rightly ridicule me and my cabinet members for not having a Scooby-Doo about what we're going to do with the Civic Hall. That's why I want to use this 14-month breathing room to actually look long and hard at what we can do to make the Civic Hall sustainable. And I would say this as well. I remember as a kid going to perform on that stage. Many people might remember Technics Music Academy on Abbey Street when it was there. Abbey Music Studios it was called. It had a music academy. From the age of about 6 until I was about 18, I performed on that stage when they did that. I get the rush of exhilaration and the pit of fear in your stomach going out there as a child and the benefits that brings. I do get it. But at the same time, I have to be fair financially to the residents of this borough. So I am emotionally invested in this as much as I'm concerned about the finances.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. If there's no other questions, we shall move forward on the agenda. Okay, thank you. Move forward to item 7, biodiversity, offsetting the monies within the S106 agreement. Ashley.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to pass over to Councillor Smith to provide some introductory words, and then we'll, myself and Jackie, will take any questions if needed.
Thank you, Councillor Smith.
Okay, thank you, Chair. This report will allow committee to scrutinise the effectiveness of the Council's biodiversity offsetting process to ensure new development within the borough does not allow for loss of biodiversity. The report sets out the background to the planning system with regards to conditions and Section 106 obligations, that can be used to protect or mitigate the potential loss of biodiversity due to development. The report also sets out an explanation of the importance of biodiversity impact assessments and offsetting, and goes on to explore upcoming changes to biodiversity impact assessments following the Environment Act. Appendix A at page 21 of the report sets out the Borough Plan Policy NE3. That's all about biodiversity and geodiversity. Appendix B is the infrastructure funding statement. This is an annual report published by the Council which provides a summary of all developer contributions relating to 106 planning obligations collected and managed within the Borough. The various tables give breakdowns of new Section 106 agreements signed during the year, together with monies collected and detail of the specific items that they refer to. Tables 1 and 2 show the detail of Section 106 agreements signed during the last year. At tables 3 to 7, you will see set out monies received from agreements, and it explains the status of that money, whether it's been allocated or not to a specific project, for instance, and whether it's been spent, or if so, on what. And at table 8, you'll see it sets out monies that have been received from Section 106 planning obligations signed at any time in the past, but the money is still retained by the Council during the last year. That totals just under £3.7 million. And finally, at Appendix C, you'll see a listed planning applications that include biodiversity offsetting or land for ecology within their S106 agreements, together with the value and the detail of the use. So the recommendation is for committee to note the contents of that report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Appreciate that. Is there any questions for either Councillor Smith or for Ashley? Councillor Condacor.
I'll just state for the record that my house backs onto Bellway Phase 3. Obviously, that's been approved and it's being built, so it's not something we're going to change. So I don't think I've got an issue about not speaking on it, but I just mention it for the record. In terms of biodiversity offsetting, I've got quite a lot of experience of going through these calculations and all the problems we've had. I don't know if Councillor Smith can sort of give us a bit of a response to a few of these issues. But one of the issues we have is the biodiversity of the site is ruined before they put the planning application in. We've had this on quite a few applications where on a Sunday morning they come in, they rip the hedges. I think one of the ones down Gypsy Lane that never got developed had a lot of damage done before they put the planning application in, and the calculations were being done from the site when the guy walked around after the planning application. So that's always been a big issue. The second issue is almost all this offsetting is for Wildflower Meadows. They're absolutely beautiful, but biodiversity has to be a diversity. So they do well for butterflies and bees, but you need the trees and the other habitats. So I think our biodiversity offsetting's not been diverse enough in terms of what things we put back. And the third thing I really wanted Councillor Smith to ask, or the officers, is about keeping biodiversity on the site rather than paying a lump of money. So something gets done to offset the damage, which quite often means that is done many years after. If you look at these planning applications, you have an offsetting that something's get done, you build it over 3 years, and then 3 or 4 years later they plant a Wildflower Meadow. Whereas if it was actually incorporated onto the Bellway or Taylor Wimpey site, the land with the trees or the Wildflower Meadow, it would then happen at least at a similar time to the development happening. So it's this sort of temporal thing. And also it would mean that people would benefit from the biodiversity in the area that lost it. So if there's a development in, say, Bulkington, the biodiversity would be part of that development in Bulkington, rather than some money that would end up going to the Dingle or going to Exhall or at some future date. So I think those 3 points do need looking at going forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Condacor. Jackie?
There's quite a few there and a lot of detail. Can I defer that over to Jackie?
Yes, indeed. Jackie, please.
Okay, thank you. Taking the first question about them taking the biodiversity out just before they submit an application, yes, it's something we're well aware of, and obviously we get complaints from neighbouring properties. It's something that we look at, and what we will try and address when we receive biodiversity offsetting is an awareness of what was actually on the site. It's something, as you know, we're looking at a borough plan review, and it's something that we've been considering of putting some wording in there of saying that when we consider biodiversity, if there's been any detrimental impact to it in the recent years, then we won't consider that as part of it. So it's something that, as I say, we will hopefully address. In terms of the second part, you were on about the Wildflower Meadows. Yes, that's what the first 4 contracts will be for actually the spending of the money. They are quick win situations, and they were reasonably close to where the sites were. It's come to a case now where we're going to need bigger application or bigger sites, because we've just about gone through all the Wildflower Meadows where we can do that. So what we'll be looking at in the future will be river corridors, wildlife corridors, etc., etc. And we'll be looking at probably ponds and things, and looking at offsetting in terms of those places as well. It was just that was a situation of where we could actually spend the money at the time for the future for fairly quickly and turn it around, and it was a biodiversity net gain fairly quickly turn around. In terms of the third question about keeping it on the site, yes, that's what we'd always want to see, and that's what parks who assess our biodiversity impact assessments would always want to see. I can tell you, as a previous planning officer with the local authority, we have protracted discussions, it can take 6-8 months with Matt, with the developers, trying to ensure that we do that first of all on site. The sequential test that we go through, the legislation requires, is that in the first instance it's avoidance. If biodiversity, the impact on biodiversity on a site can't be avoided, then we'll look at mitigation. The mitigation is firstly on site, and Matt will work with us and with the developer and try to get the most we can out the site. It's only then we look off site. That is basically the final place we look. We will always keep it within the site, but as you can appreciate, if you're developing a site, if you're putting around about 25-30% of that site as houses, you're inevitably going to get a loss, which is why we try to look on those lines firstly. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Jackie. Is there any other questions? I've got one, in actual fact. With regards to the monies that have been allocated, sort of close on 4 million, 3.6, of that sort of money, what has actually been spent so far on biodiversity?
Yeah, we have, as you confirm, it's 300 and it's about 43,000, I think, that we've got for retention for biodiversity offsetting. Unfortunately, we hadn't got officers within the parks team to actually spend that money up to now. That they have now recruited, and they have officers that can actually take on that specific job. And that, I think it states in the report, the first 4 development monies from development is going to be spent this summer. Those haven't been officially allocated to which particular offsetting sites they refer to, but that is with the intention. And then hopefully, as we have somebody in place within the parks team now, then we can start actually spending all the other money as well. It does state in my report it's not a quick thing to do, because with some of the offsetting, it tends to be, if we're doing it, it will be on some of our open space. And such as Wildflower Meadows that Councillor Condacor referred to, people may not actually like that. They see grass not being cut and they see it looking fairly overgrown. So it isn't just a case we can just go onto a site and do some sort of mitigation. It's a case of actually trying to buy the community, the local community that uses those facilities in, and that is in the, some of the time we'll put the parks team will put site notices, etc. up in order to tell the public what's going on and why something's happening on the site.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for that, Jackie. If you could then keep us informed of progress regarding those money spent, that'd be appreciated. Thank you. Any other questions relating to biodiversity? Yes, Councillor Watkins.
Thank you. I think Jackie's probably covered it a little bit there, is the fact that we haven't got enough officers to go out and check that the biodiversity work's being done. So are you telling me that that's just going to come down to parks and not planning? And also, I think this will definitely come to you, won't come to you, Richard, is could we put something in an SPD or something to ask for things like green walls, living roofs, things like that, to be put on some of the building sites to help with the biodiversity. I know that when we've done some work on some of the garage sites, so I have asked for things like this to be done, and for the schools, local schools, and that to be involved in planting like some of the early spring flowers like crocuses, snowdrops and things to come up early in the spring to help with the kickstart of spring sort of thing and the insects. So is there anything that we could bring in to help with that and in planning? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Watkins. Jackie?
We're obviously going through a borough plan review. Part of that is taking into consideration climate change, the Environment Act, and also carbon zero emissions by 2050. That will all feed into biodiversity and making more of greening, such as green roofs, etc. We can't make people put green roofs up, but that will be written into future policies to try and encourage as much, the same as tree planting, etc. Because that is what we're going to be required as a council anyway.
Thank you. Thank you. No other questions? Sorry, Councillor Condacor.
Thank you. That green roof comment from the officers, do the green roofs count in the offsetting? Because obviously, if you're doing an industrial site or a school, you can sometimes have a very, very large flat roof, so that would help with the amount of nature. And also, I think we need to really push that they help with flooding, because a roof that's a green roof doesn't drain off and cause a flood surge. I don't know if Chris or someone would second a motion to actually have ask the portfolio holder to look at green roofs from industrial and commercial buildings as part of the borough plan review or something. Because I think we don't do enough of it, and it is very sad to see very large roofs with just tin roofs. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Condacor. Can we answer?
Okay,
Thank you.
Do you want me to address that? Please. Yeah. Yes, we haven't had any specific green roofs, so I don't know how we would actually treat it in terms of biodiversity. But reading the legislation that I've been reading for the borough plan review, then yes, it's anticipated that would probably be in the biodiversity calculations. We will be going to a new matrix with the Environment Act anyway, from DEFRA in due course, and I suspect that will pick up as part of anything green roofs, because as you say, there are other environmental benefits of them as well. And it's something that we will be putting into the policy consideration of green roofs, etc., where we can. In terms of industrial units, it's difficult because of, in terms of insulation, etc. But it's something, again, that we can actually put on there. But we're actually trying to address to get up to the top specification for building regulations and for BREEAM for industrial units. So we are very much looking at the wider picture in terms of sustainability. Same go for tree planting, wildlife buffers, etc.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for that, Jackie. I'd like to move forward on to item 8, monitoring of the borough local plan. Pass over to Councillor Smith. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This report will allow committee to scrutinise the effectiveness of the Council's local plan monitoring process and understand an up-to-date position in relation to land supply and housing completions. The report sets out the background to the borough plan adopted in 2019 and explains the monitoring process. It gives key updates on housing completions, including a breakdown of housing types, and talks about the importance of the 5-year land supply and highlights its improvement. It's currently increased to 5.4 years, up from 5.1 years in 2020. The improvement is largely due to new planning applications being submitted and approved within the strategic allocations, as well as other windfall applications that have been approved. With regards to employment land, the adopted borough plan set a delivery target of 107 hectares of employment land during the original period, which was 2011 to 2031. That equates to approximately 5 hectares of employment land per annum. Only 3 hectares of employment land was delivered during 2020 to 2021, with approximately 22 hectares of employment land delivered since the start of the borough plan calculations, which was 2011. That's well below the required target. However, it should be noted that all delivery to date has been via windfall developments like the Hello Fresh development, and none of the strategic employment allocations have been delivered or built out to date. Several planning applications have been submitted for the strategic employment sites at Falklands Farm, Wilson's Lane and Longford Road, and so we're hopeful delivery employment land is expected to increase over the coming years. Appendix A sets out the terms on which the monitoring report is prepared, and at Appendix B you'll see full details of the monitoring report itself. So the recommendation is for committee to note the contents of that report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Do we have any questions relating to the report? Councillor Condacor?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, me again. This report is a backward-looking report, so it's to the year ending the 31st of March 2021, effectively more or less where the last administration left off. And I'm quite interested on page 52 is the table 1, which is the borough plan timetable, because that was quite clear that even before the May election last year, there was an intention to review the plan in 3 years, and we've still got this that we're just publishing now that says the plan will be adopted in February 2023, i.e. a year from today. We've clearly since then changed things, and yet we're publishing something which is quite out of date. But the interesting thing about this is it does say we'll be consulting on a publication version in January 2022. That was ambitious anyway, but it'd be really useful to know we're actually making progress on it, because the officers seem to have been taken off onto Gypsy and Travellers, etc. And if we're just publishing this local development strategy, whatever it's called, LDS or whatever, yeah, it should make reference to where we're going as well. These tables about strategic matters are partly forward-looking. So I don't know if it needs updating or changing or noting the year's delay. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. You're right, it is backward looking, and that's why it's got that historic reference in there. You know full well, and we've been through this many times, what the changes are to that timetable. We've inserted an extra public consultation, and we're waiting for the header figures before we can start discussions with our neighbours about housing numbers. And you'll know full well, because I know we've had this conversation, that those header numbers won't be available for us to use until they've been adjusted with the census, and that will more than likely be towards the middle of the year. We're hopeful to get a publication document out for consultation by the middle of this year, and we're hopeful that we can submit that document to the inspector early in 2023. So some of the reasons for the delay are totally out of our control, but we are inserting that extra opportunity for the public to have a say on the final publication document, so they're having a say in how that's shaped, and that will likely take place in June, July of this year.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. I believe Ashley wishes to say something.
Thank you, Chair. It's just so the Scrutiny Committee are aware, and I'm pretty sure I've made the point before, with authority monitoring reports, as Councillor Smith and Councillor Condicle have articulated, they are backward-looking, so sometimes data's published, and when you are then scrutinising it quite a period after, things have moved on. So with the Borough Plan timetable, that is just the factual point that at that point in time, during the monitoring period, that was the timetable. The AMR is not the place to then be doing updates later, because we have to publish it at a point in time. The only thing we can really look to do that the scrutiny panel may want to challenge officers is, can we get these out sooner? Can we get the authority monitoring report out sooner, and can it come back to scrutiny sooner? And that's something that we're working on internally to see if we can speed that process up. So, in future, we'd want to be sitting in front of you May, ideally, and then you've got a clear picture as of 31st of March 22, what is the monitoring status.
Thank you for that, Ashley. Any other questions? Councillor Watkins.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And this is in no way a criticism to any work that's been done by the officers. But I noticed in the report that we're still close to the 5-year supply on housing, and although we've had a bit of a reprieve on the employment sites, how confident are you that we're still going to be on top of the 5-year housing supply and the 5-year employment sites, even when it says within the report that we've been reliant on some windfall sites? Also, the thing to note about anything as in employment sites within this borough is we can't exactly do anything big, because I know when I worked with Ash a while ago on a previous employer of mine, they wanted to be the biggest in Europe, but they couldn't come to Nuneaton or Bedworth because we never had a site that was big enough for them. So if we had somebody turn up like Jaguar Land Rover and wanted to put a gigabyte site on in our borough, they couldn't do it. So I think things like that would be good to let the public know that although we've got we're looking for so many different employment sites, they won't be they won't be huge. I think things like that would be useful in the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Watkins. If you could respond to that, please, Ashley.
Thank you, Chair. So in terms of the first point, in terms of confidence, I mean, in terms of 5-year land supply, we are in a better position. So what I would say is I would be more confident that the authority have a better chance at appeal of defending the 5-year land supply position. We've got a bit more of a buffer. The reality is the only way you can really improve your 5-year land supply, the tool that the authority would use, is reviewing its local plan, so its borough plan. So we're going through that process. So really now it's incumbent on the officers and the authority to really sweat those existing allocations. Are they fit for purpose? If not, do we need different allocations? And we're obviously looking at the housing figures as well. So it's the housing figure that ultimately influences that land supply position. That all takes time to move forward. In terms of the economic element, obviously with the borough plan there are extant employment allocations. So I think we are in a reasonably strong position that if a sort of national or international employer wanted to move into the borough, we have those allocations there. And, you know, we obviously can't go into too much detail, but with certain sites moving forward, I think that demonstrate that there's interest of locating within the borough. But again, in terms of enabling that sort of development, it's ultimately about having an up-to-date plan and allocations that are fit for purpose. So I think, again, we've got an opportunity to review that as part of the review process.
Thank you, Ash. I hope that answers your questions.
Yeah, it has, Chair. It's just that I still think it would be important to put in the report that we haven't got huge employment sites, and that, you know, a large employer coming to the borough could take up, for instance, one site. So I just think something like that would be useful to let the public know.
Thank you. Ash, please.
I don't have an issue with articulating that. I think the council are reviewing its economic development strategy, and that's probably the best place for that reflection. Because with the authority monitoring report, it is ultimately meant to be just a factual position of here's policy X within the plan, and this is how we're sort of performing. So yeah, you could articulate that within the dialogue, and I'm happy to sort of take that away, but I'd probably suggest that I'll have a conversation with colleagues in economic development and see if they can put it as part of that strategy.
Thank you, Ash. Councillor Condacor.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'd like to thank Ash for saying he wants to bring this report back in May in future, because I think being timely will be really important, because lots of things in this report actually create questions, and actually if those questions are created quite quickly, it's so useful. I mean, the one I had when reading through it was about C2, the extra care housing, and it's almost a year since the end of the year of the study period, but I'm very concerned we haven't had any brought forward in this period. I didn't know whether that was actually being corrected now. And the second question I had, just to finish off with, was the demolitions for transforming the Nuneaton Highway projects. We're losing quite a lot of retail. Has there been a measure done to see how much we're going to lose? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Ash, please.
So in terms of the last question, I mean, all the measures are articulated here. So if there's anything missing, that's because it wasn't agreed as part of that borough plan. As Jackie alluded to earlier, we can look at new measures. Not everything has to be within the authority monitoring report, you know, so transforming Nuneaton might actually fit better somewhere else in terms of live indicators. That's probably a wider discussion. In terms of bringing it back in May, that's my aspiration. I can't commit to it, and I think if I had all the team sitting here, the sort of faces would drop, you know, because it is quite an onerous process in terms of them going through the monitoring. I believe we should be bringing this to members as soon as we possibly can, and that is our aspiration. But we do have to sort of marry that up with the pressures that the team are under and the priorities that they tackle. So I can't say we definitely will be here in May. what I can say is, as head of service, that's what I want us to be sort of targeting.
Thank you, Ash. Councillor Condacall.
Oh, and just on my final point, which was my first point, the lack of any C2 class development in the annual monitoring report. We're not developing any care homes or extra care homes. 0 is quite a low figure when the target was 100 and something beds per year.
Ash.
I mean, that's just what the data illustrates. So there isn't really much I can comment. I mean, that's what it illustrates. That's perhaps then something that needs to be picked up as part of our review process. And then we probably need to sort of explore things further and work with the industry to see, well, what's the pipeline. But in terms of the data, I can't really comment because obviously it's quite clear what the output is.
Thank you, Ash. Thank you very much for your report from yourself and your other colleagues. Obviously, from our point of view as a committee, we'd like to see the information as soon as possible into the new year. And I appreciate that obviously time and constraints, i.e. manpower, etc. But if you can do your best, please, to bring it forward as soon as possible, it would be appreciated. Thank you. Moving forward then on to item 9, forward plan. Which is it's information. Do you have any comments regarding that? Everybody happy with the forward plan? Good, thank you. Draft work programme for this committee. We have received a communication from Mr. Margrave, which would fit quite comfortably within our SOSP, with regards to the style of build in Nuneaton Town Centre, etc., regarding to the developments thereof. I've asked the request to get some information regarding that, and I would like to bring it forward to the next meeting of this committee. Happy with that? Okay. We can ask Ashley and his team to look at that for us, please. Okay, thank you very much indeed. Do we have any other business, any other matters? Councillor Condacall.
Just looking at the work programme, it talks about the LE Local Enterprise Partnership in December 21. Did we have that? I'm getting forgetful, but I can't remember Dawn doing anything on the Local Enterprise Partnership.
What page are we on? Sorry, Councillor.
141, the very...
41, okay.
Yeah. I can't remember a presentation on the Local Enterprise Partnership in December, so I don't know if that's something we've missed or if I was asleep.
I think you're correct. We didn't have one, no. Who's responsible for that? Okay, if we can request then Dawn Dawson to look at that for us and bring it forward to the next meeting. Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions, any other issues? No, in which case I thank you all for this and I take this meeting to a close. Thank you.